What is up, Sleep Tribe? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Healthy Sleep Revolution podcast. My name is Meghna Dassani. Today, I have a new friend. And I say new, well, just because look at her, she's gorgeous.
Oh,
But it seems
well,
like
right back at you.
it feels like I've known her forever. And the stars aligned and we are doing this. So
Yes,
I want to introduce you guys to Mollie McGlocklin. Did I say that right or did I butcher
you
it?
did.
Okay,
Perfect.
perfect,
Oh,
perfect.
great job.
And I will have her bio and all the good stuff in the show notes. We're not going to waste time on reading that because she is a wealth of information. And I'm actually going to let her just dive in and tell us about how it is that she got into the sleep journey. I know where it is. I'm going to let her share and how it is that she is helping people. All right, Mollie, take it away.
Absolutely. Well, number one, thank you so much for having me. Number two, I completely agree. I do feel like we are old friends at this point. We've been able to kind of have some back and forth and chat a little bit. And I think we're going to actually meet up in person at some point, which would be fantastic. It's always rare when that actually happens nowadays, it feels.
Yes.
So really grateful to be connected with you and for all the work that you're doing. Just, so important. And as far as my kind of backstory, it is, I think, relevant to our conversation that I think we're going to get into today on really providing some practical, certainly it's my intention to provide some kind of practical takeaways for the listener on things that they can do to up-level their sleep wherever it might be. And also even looking at this conversation of optimization. That's really our wheelhouse, that sleep is a skill, is how to optimize your sleep no matter where it might be. But it might help the listener to know that it was not always this way for me, certainly. And the reason that this all began really came from solving my own problem with my own sleep. What that looked like was as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends. I had lots of labels around my sleep. I had it that I was a short sleeper, a night owl. It's in my genes. So sleep when you're dead, labels and narratives of how I was managing my sleep, or maybe not managing my sleep. And I also had it that it was fixed, that it was always like this, and that it was always going to be this way, and that there wasn't really much to look at, and it was more about kind of surviving it, making it through, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, maybe take some more personal development classes, think differently, mind over matter, all of this stuff. So that's how it was for me for many years. And certainly for most of my youth, that also had some element of that. And then for sure my 20s. And what ended up happening as I started getting older was getting more and more anxious, more stressed, more sick more often. I had the beginnings of an ulcer. I had shingles in my 20s, just a lot of signs that things were not working out so well as far as my well-being was concerned, but wasn't really identifying sleep as a part of this whole picture. So it was not until I went through this period of insomnia while traveling internationally that absolutely changed my life. It was truly, really a rock bottom moment in my life. It was this tipping point of overwhelm, burnout, and really what culminated was this for me, the symptomology was this inability to sleep, this sense of being tired and wired, and night after night, just not being able to have any sense of guarantee that I would get any sleep throughout the course of the night. And this just went on days and days and days, and I really felt like I was losing my mind. And it was really a scary time because during that period, I had also seen for myself in family history of pharmaceutical use and mental health issues. And so this for me spelled, is this the moment? Is this when I'm going to start having to be dependent on all kinds of things? And is this my future? So it really lit a fire under me to figure this out, to get at the source of this, to understand more. And when going down the rabbit hole, this is really one of my points that I want to make, is that what I began to discover really brought such a level of fascination for me in the realm, particularly of chronobiology, the science of time and how time affects our biology, and really understanding how far off I had been living my life and how far off from some of these principles that we can get into how by beginning to bring in some of these things into my life, how it just kind of fell into place, a level of workability and quality of sleep that I never thought possible for myself. So not only did we get back to, that homeostasis level of my sleep, which wasn't that great before, it actually then, now I'm sleeping, but now I can actually start to optimize my sleep, which was a whole new world. And what ended up coming out of this was just, I could not stop talking about this because it so fundamentally changed my life and my experience of my life that I just started working organically with people because I was so empathetic for others that were dealing with that, because it was so, rooting for me, or like a lack of foundation, or a lot of unrest during that period, no pun intended. So with that, then I grew to small groups, one-on-ones. We have weekly newsletter that now we've been sending every Monday for almost 4 years, for 207 Mondays. We have a weekly podcast with top sleep experts. We have a particular niche in the poker arena, interestingly enough. So we work with a lot of high stakes poker players, as well as UFC fighters, and we're in hotels, Casa Cipriani, and other things in Manhattan. So I say all that because this all came out of really one of the lowest points in my life, and how that all was related to my sleep. So no matter where anyone might be listening from in their sleep, whether it's just like okay or really, really problematic, there are absolutely things that we can do, and I'm excited to get into that today.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that is what helped to develop sleep as a skill. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And it's a program, am I right?
Yes. So what we do is, so our commitment is really looking at sleep through this lens of technology, accountability, behavioral change, and how that intersection can really help to bring about fundamental behavioral change shifts for the individual, but through data is really part of our focus. So we do have every client wearing at least an Oura ring, consumer grade tracker. Yeah, got our Oura rings, exactly. Now, are there limitations and are there things that are not perfect about any sleep wearable, consumer grade wearable on the market? Absolutely. There's certain things that, if of interest, we can share some of the metrics that might be important to look at, might maybe be not so great to look at. But there are certainly some really powerful benefits that we can get from understanding and just having a kind of automated log or diary of what's happening in not only our sleep, but also some of our health metrics, and then even our activities throughout the course of the day, how our kind of stress response looks throughout the course of the day, and some of the newer generations, and other pieces of information that can be really, really helpful for people in managing not only both their sleep, but their stress load, their mental health, a number of things that are really fascinating.
That is amazing. So much good information that we can get from this. Let me ask you this. Is this program, or do you work with, is it mainly geared towards adults, or is there any application for kids, for moms that may be listening that are struggling with sleep issues in their kids? Where does this fall in?
Yeah.
What are their resources?
Yeah, really good question. So we certainly cater to parents as far as their experience of their sleep. We don't address, sleep training for new infants or very young children. So our stance is that there is a whole world of information on that area, and absolutely can get very layered, very controversial in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of different opinions in that world. I do not have a child. I do not purport to, be an expert in that area by any means. And certainly we do bring experts onto the podcast to address some of that. But what we really focus in on are, we go into more adolescents and adults. So there is that kind of crossover. And because we are catering to people to help train that wearable awareness piece. So pulling some of that information from your wearables, and then how we can make behavioral change around that, or in alignment with that. Not being at the effect of that, because we want to be clear that we're not trying to be obsessive, but instead just informed.
Correct. And teens are the perfect demographic, the age group for us to actually, because if we can train them at this age to look for, make the changes that the data is telling us, we're setting them up with a good base rather than try to fix it when they're adults.
100%. Yes. No, you're so right. I mean, I just want to echo that because what we find is that oftentimes they are just so quick with starting to spot some of those patterns, starting to see what does make a difference, and then setting them up powerfully for new transitional phases ahead, whether it's going off to college or new jobs or whatever this might look like, so that then they can be managing that and have an awareness of what kind of works for them.
Yeah. So I know I am going to be mindful of your time today. We kind of touched upon that, but this is fascinating stuff. What are the numbers that you look at? What is the data that you look at without, I know we can't go into everything, but what are your red flags when you're looking at the information that you get when you're working with somebody?
Yeah, really important question. So since everyone that we are working with does at least have the Oura Ring, many individuals are kind of biohackers, if you will, or have lots of different wearables. So they might have other wearable tech. One call out about that is certainly not cross comparing against different wearables because they have their own unique algorithms. So instead, just looking at the trends specific to that individual wearable. But a couple of things that we look at. One, we have people pay quite a bit of attention more to the, if we're talking about Oura Ring, some of what they call their readiness indicators, which are heart rate, HRV, known as heart rate variability, body temperature, and respiratory rate. And they just recently added on blood oxygen readouts as well. Yes. So
it had me all kinds of excited. Yes.
Yes, I'm sure. Oh my gosh. So really interesting to help us measure some of those and monitor some of those changes, because that's where I see a lot of the behavioral change piece really make your arguments are almost made for you when you have those pieces of data. So what I mean by that is often I will see people that will come to me who for years were saying, oh, I'm a great sleeper. I fall asleep as soon as my head hits the pillow, all of this sort of, isms of how they deemed that they're a great sleeper. Then they get a tracker and then they start saying, oh no, well, what is going on here? Now these stats are not so great, doesn't seem to align. So what we'll often suddenly see is that how much our behaviors can impact some of those results. So for example, the most common ones I see are people eating late, people drinking even like one glass of whatever type of alcohol, THC, other things that just can so overtly, so clearly show changes in some of those metrics that I just mentioned. Those will look really, really clear. Particularly heart rate variability is one that I get a lot of clients coming to me just for that one metric, that they're looking to improve that one metric. And part of the reason for that is that that metric is thought to be a metric of recovery and really indicating moment to moment, how are you recovering? So certainly you can look at it throughout the entire course of the day, but on these nighttime trackers, they're looking at nocturnal HRV or nocturnal recovery metrics. So that can be really eye-opening when you see, oh my gosh, so just one or two glasses of wine, I'm going to really obliterate that number and really bring that down, which is not what we want to do for heart rate variability. So that starts to make the argument for you for some of those clear low-hanging fruit, but also for other things that might be a little bit more nuanced. And one thing that I think is really interesting is stress load and kind of just mental health, and how that can often show up in there. And I see a lot of people with chronic anxiety and, just really grappling with a sense of overwhelm or stress or otherwise, and it's showing up on these numbers, which I think can be really, really helpful in a particular way. There are groups that, might not benefit from that at certain times if you're dealing with obsessive tendencies, and, there might be a time and a place. But overall, I see a lot of benefits for people for a couple of reasons. One, actually having a sense that, oh wow, I did actually sleep a little last night, because sometimes there can be that sense of almost paradoxical insomnia where we think we're not sleeping a wink, but we're actually logging some sleep. Maybe it's not, and it's not to say we're not putting a cap on what's possible, just say, oh, we'll deal with it. We're actually just trying to train ourselves to know, okay, I did get a little sleep last night. And what can I do to improve upon that? So one, that often can quell some fears, that alone, but then also to have objective measurements systems that can really point to the fact that, oh wow, I am kind of getting more stressed. I've had this baseline and now I really am starting to go down. What can I do to start to pull myself back up to that baseline again? And I think that alone can be so helpful for us to kind of manage ourselves in a way that we've often forgotten.
Yeah, this is just fascinating stuff because we don't realize what happens during the day, how it's impacting. Yes, we talk about sleep hygiene all day long, the glass of wine, the warm bath, or whatever it is. But what is it that's causing stress?
Yeah.
At what point? At what time? Like literally, when do you turn off your emails? When do you stop looking at the stock market? So many little factors that contribute to that impacts sleep, and you never even think about it.
Yeah.
So, and if you can measure it, you can address it. So I love that. Love it. Love it. What are your main culprits that you see that affect people
Yeah, great question as well.
or their sleep?
So a couple things now, and I will say it is definitely bio-individual, because for some people, they say, all right, I've got the whole morning sunlight down, I'm turning down my lights at night, and this, that, and the other. But for them, it is the nighttime eating. For them, it is, and I should call out a little quick caveat about that in case anyone's like, well, that's not me. I'm not like eating in bed or anything. What we do see is that there's something known as circadian rhythm intermittent fasting, and that's a recommended approach to explore, which, despite the fancy name, really just means that you're eating between sunrise and sunset. And many of us, especially in the winter months, will find that we are deviating outside of that. And so to explore what that could look like, which oftentimes I've seen people play with things like 4 to 5 hours before they fall asleep, they're taking their last bite of food, and how much of a difference that can make on their heart rate levels, their HRV, sleep quality, a number of metrics being really improved there. And granted, manage your health in the way you used to manage your health, not medical advice, but certainly,
Right.
yes, a little disclaimer there, but it can be really interesting from kind of an experimental perspective, and I just by and large see that one to be so huge. And when we think about that first bite, last bite, that part is really important, because sometimes people will say, well, I had my dinner hours ago, but then I'm just having this little snack and this little thing. So the thinking from circadian biology or from circadian medicine is this approach of everything we're doing can send a signal to our clocks of what time it is and what to be doing when. So whether it's your environmental space or some of the behaviors you might be engaging in, and from that place, then it's telling yourself what time it is, and then all hormones to be released and a whole cascade of events. And if we are sending the wrong signals at the wrong time, like even just turning on the digestive process, then that can make it more difficult to both fall asleep, stay asleep, and affect melatonin production, among many other concerns. So I think that is something that's going to absolutely start getting more and more attention in the future. And I do see a lot of people, since we do make a big urge for leveraging technology, a lot of our people are also wearing continuous glucose monitors. And that's something that can be really eye-opening. If anyone's listening and hasn't worn a continuous glucose monitor, whether you're diabetic or not, and most of the people I'm speaking to are not actually diabetic in using these, and are blown away by the difference that just, the same sandwich that they have at 8 p.m. and if you have that same thing at 8 a.m., the very different response that can come about, because glucose is on a circadian rhythm as well. So lots to kind of unpack there, but I'd say that's a really common one. Certainly the alcohol, THC, different drugs, so known as chronopharmacology, so the timing of your drugs, That one's really
Yes.
super important. And we're not even getting into, sleeping aids or benzodiazepines, hypnotics, and sleep supplements or stimulants, and how some of the timing of that can play into things. So I see a lot of that. But then I also just see more kind of interesting and often harder to spot or manage things like thought timing. So we call this thought timing of starting to really audit the types of thoughts that you're engaging in at what time throughout the day, and what really are conducive to your, what we call your circadian crafted day. So we have people craft out their day from a circadian lens, and what would be the things that would be in alignment with down regulation. We're trying to down regulate our brain state at night so that we can really just calm ourselves down. And we did have a sleep coach for the Olympics on the podcast, which was really fascinating. And he called it this. He said that in the hours leading up to sleep, you want to avoid novelty. So from that place, you wouldn't want to be starting the new Stranger Things season 4 on Netflix. It's all new, and it's like, what's happening? Oh my god! And so you wouldn't necessarily want to do that. You also wouldn't want to go and look at your emails. You wouldn't want to just anything that's new and could bring about a whole slew of new brain activity. We want to really be minimizing that, and that doesn't mean that it has to look so lofty and fancy. I think people get stuck in this. I know I certainly did from a perfectionist standpoint. Oh, it's got to be soft music and stretching and yoga, and sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's like, I will put in certain, giving yourself enough of a kind of curfew, if you will, but having some really basic and almost silly, boring things that happen every single night. So my fiance and I often have a ritual we put on The Office at the end of the night as we're winding down, because we know just about every single episode, it's light, it's fun, laughy, and just puts us in a great state to kind of, head into the evening. So whatever it is for you, it doesn't have to look some fancy pants way.
Right, right. Wow, great stuff. Great stuff. What are your best sleep tips for those that are listening?
Okay. So everything we do is really meant to be rooted in entrainment, and so biorhythm entrainment. And what we mean by that is looking at how our biorhythms, most notably circadian rhythm, 24-hour rhythm, how we can entrain this to strengthen this. There is also another rhythm. It's super important if you're a woman of menstruating age, you're in infradian rhythm. And that rhythm is really happening on about a monthly schedule, about 28 days or so on the average woman or person of menstruating. And from that place, there's going to be lots of changes that happen for your sleep and your hormones and your health at different points throughout that cycle. So really being aware of that can be a whole other area of interest. A little too much to get into today, but do be aware that that is something that you can entrain. And also the entrainment process, though, for circadian rhythm, we want to look at what are the things that are known as zeitgebers or time givers. And this is all in the world of chronobiology, the science of time and how this affects your biology. What are the things that are kind of top down, most impactful for your biology to keep you in a strong sleep piece of the sleep-wake cycle and a wake piece of the sleep-wake cycle? You also want to, when you are awake, feel fully awake and energetic and all of that good stuff. So what we do, the most important thing, if you get nothing out of what I'm talking about today, is that light is the hugest lever of this whole thing. So what that looks like is that even forgetting what happens for you at night, which many of us do hyper-fixate and hyper-focus on when we can't sleep. We do a lot for the evenings and the bedroom environment, and that's all great. But we often forget about the first thing that we're doing when we wake up and how much that impacts our sleep, and many people might not even know. So when you first wake up, one, you want to select a wake-up time that is consistent 7 days a week. This can often be the biggest game changer for most people, or for many people. But so you pick your 7 day a week wake-up time. You can have a little bit of leeway around plus or minus 30 minutes on either side, but you're really keeping that consistent. And then right as you get up, as quickly as possible to when you do rise, how can you marry sunlight exposure, bright light exposure to that wake up time? And that's really what we're aiming to do consistently. And we're aiming to ensure that this is not from behind a window, because there's certain studies where it shows that it can take anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer to reset your master clock from behind a window. So it's certainly better than not having, window space. There's great studies in in hospitals of patients being able to actually be left or discharged faster if they have access to windows and that circadian lighting. But getting physically outside makes all the difference. So we want to do that for just, even if you're just beginning on this, beginning with a few minutes to start, and then we work our way up. But it does have to reach the eyes, so no sunglasses or hats or any of that stuff in those early morning hours. And this is known as sunlight anchoring. So you want to anchor your sunlight exposure in the first half of your day. So if you only have a little bit of wiggle room to get yourself physically outside, make sure that you're plotting it in your morning routine piece more so than later on in the day. There's benefits to be out there later on in the day, vitamin D production and other things, but from a master clock perspective, do that. So I'm spending a lot of time on this one because it's just the most powerful top, tier one. And then, so doing that consistently, I will say lots of asterisks come up. Well, what if you're in Sweden? What if you're this? What if that? So there are light boxes that you could get. Spurdy, no affiliation, is one that is FDA cleared in the US for actually helping to produce vitamin D, which is one of the rare lamps that can do that. So that's available, or some of these bright light boxes. But certainly sunlight does have a whole other slew of health benefits that are not available in those options. So be aware of that. And then on the flip side of that is darkness. So many of us might be taking melatonin supplements, and what we want to call out about that is just knowing, one, that that's a hormone, so just having a little bit of reverence for the fact that we are externally taking a hormone. So two, how could we look at producing this as much as possible in our own right, assuming that we're not talking about true sleep disorders or true deficiencies, and can certainly test for, but for many of us, can we do some of these behavioral change interventions and produce our own melatonin to get us through the night and through those wake-ups that happen for many of us? So what that would look like is post-sunset, ideally you're outside, present for sunset, and having that really fall into your eyes, the infrared light hitting your eyes, and that also sets you up to prepare for the night ahead and prepare for more melatonin production. So the sun is set, then you're lowering the lighting in your space. So ideally is candlelight. That's really the main recommendation, but I know for many of us with kids and things and dogs and whatever, you might not have some other options. So red light, amber light, Himalayan salt lamps, fireplace, etc. But you want to really observe this. You can measure this. There's some, lux meters, light meters online that are on your apps that you can put into your space and measure this to see what numbers you're at, and making sure that you're at some of these lower lux output numbers. So you want to do that in the evening, and then of course, while in your actual bedroom, if you can do the hand test, so you put your hand up in front of your face while you're in your bedroom, you can still see your hand. Then you still have some work to do to truly black out the space to make it totally dark and cool and quiet and all that. And now there are other ones I can certainly get into, not sure our timeline, but I would say those two are some of the most powerful ones measurably of what impacts your circadian rhythm health right off the bat.
Yeah, and for sure, no pets in bed, no eating in bed. All of those things. I'm always telling patients your bed should be for sleep and sex only, instead of turning it into a let's have a sleepover and there's like 8 people and 4 puppies in there. Little things make such a huge difference. 2 questions before I let you go. What does working with you look like for a person, and how can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So one, if you're someone that's just sort of sleep curious and you want to just kind of casually learn a little bit more, we do have a lot of free information. So we have that weekly newsletter that I mentioned briefly that comes out every Monday. We call it Sleep Obsessions. So we aim to have as many just next level things in there, lots of charts and graphs and sleep experiments and studies and all that fun stuff, and we'll aim to make it fun. That's our goal within the newsletter, so you can certainly follow that. Then we have a weekly podcast with different sleep experts. And I believe we're going to have you on the podcast and share some of your amazing knowledge. So you get to hear from great experts like yourself. And then we also, beyond that, if that's not quite hitting the mark for what you're dealing with, well, then we have 3 other options of how to work with us. One, all of them do involve wearing the Oura ring. So as of right now, as of 2022, that's what we do. Although there's lots of different wearables on the market, so who knows what the future might hold. But that's what we do use right now. And so you are with your Oura ring data. You're sharing your data, so we do access that on our dashboard. So the kind of lowest commitment offering is something called Sleep 360. And that one, you share that data. We give you 2 weeks of kind of content and assessments and assignments. You do a lot of prep work beforehand. We review that before getting on a call to kind of go over and really, from a 360 perspective, look at what's going on with your sleep, with your health, and lots of other information. You send over your pictures of your sleep environment. You're taking all kinds of in-depth assessments and looks. We're also screening for red flags that could there be sleep apnea present? Would we need to kind of connect you with other doctors or people like yourself? Making sure that we're kind of setting you up powerfully and setting you up with a roadmap ahead. So that's the call option for a 90-minute call. Then there's 10-week-long group programs, and this is what we really encourage most people to do because it's very immersive. It's a group dynamic too, so then we're seeing everyone's stats, and if you're open to that, and you don't have to do that, but if you are open to that, then everyone can see that, but I can at least see yours. And then we're really every single week making fundamental shifts to your behavior, to your environment, and otherwise, and really ensuring that by the time you leave that, you have a slew of tools and measurable differences with your stats by the end. And then if you have a lot that you want to kind of unpack individually, we have one-on-one options called the 90-day sleep reset. And that one we work individually with people on. And what was did I forget the last question?
How do we get a hold of you?
Okay, thanks. So that was, I'm lowering my caffeine intake recently, so I'm on matcha nowadays. And, it's just not having the same flair, I gotta say. But how do we get a hold? So sleepisaskill.com really acts as a bucket for all these things. There you can also take a free sleep assessment and automatically get free information back about your specific sleep, and then also follow some social media and all these other things, actions that you can take there.
That's perfect. You are bringing the complete package to people that are struggling with sleep. Not only are there solutions, there is accountability, which is huge because you can give me everything on a piece of paper and I could never do anything with it. So, and all of this coolness that you are sharing with everyone.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I just want to underscore that part of the reason that this came about was I vividly remember I shared when this all happened for me. I was traveling internationally, and I literally, my fiance and I had a one-way ticket. We were like, we're going to be digital nomads and bring our work on the road, and it was just a disaster. So we had to kind of leave early, and go back to the States to really figure out this whole sleep thing for me. And I remember getting back, and we put everything in storage, so we're just like had no grounded. We're had this sense of what am I going to do with this? And I was like, why is there no sleep support group or I need like an AA for sleep? And I can laugh about it now, but at the time, like I really wanted support because I felt terrified, I felt embarrassed, shameful, like just a whole slew of emotions.
And alone, right? There's nobody there. 100%. Yeah. And I tell patients this too. This is a hard reset that you're having to do. So give yourself grace, be patient with yourself as your body adapts to where it actually needs to be. And thankfully, we now have you to help us with all of this. So thank you so much for your time today. And for our listeners, I will have all of her resources, links, ways to contact her in the show notes so you can find her. Go look at her website. It's a beautiful website. Lots of information. Sleepisaskill.com. Exactly. Is that correct? And yes, here's to healthy sleep for everybody. Thank you so much, Molly. This was
Well,
amazing.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. So important, and really, you're just a pioneer in the space, and really helping to make take this stand on this important thing that we do every single night. That so many of us are just looking for guidance and support on.
It certainly takes a team, and I'm glad we're in this
Absolutely.
together. Awesome. All right, guys, it would mean a lot if you would leave us a review, share, because this is important stuff. Share it with your friends, families, anybody that is in your life that is important to you, or if not, everybody needs to sleep.